Hey YouTube, Do-It-Yourself Junkie 369, and in today's video I'm going to be talking about torque wrenches that you'll probably use on your aircraft build, and then also dog bones and crow's feet. And then an optional item, torque stripe. And I call it optional because if you're building your own aircraft you can choose to put it on there. I like putting it on there because it's a good indicator if something's coming loose. So I'll show how that is applied as well. Now, during my build process, I'm using two different types of torque wrench. I have a beam style torque wrench where you put the socket on the nut or bolt that you're tightening, and as you twist it, this beam moves along the scale, giving you an indication of what the torque being applied is. The other style I have is called a click wrench or a click stop wrench, and basically it has a scale here that reads similar to a micrometer. So you have 20, 30, 40, 50, and where this lines up with the number and the 0, for example there, we're at 20, 21, 22, 23, 24, until it rotates around to the 0, and now we're at 30. And so that's how that's read. And with it, you put it on the nut or bolt that you're tightening down, and then when you hit the torque, it'll click over like so. And you have to be real careful to listen or feel for that click, because on the smaller wrenches with the lighter torques, you can miss it, and there's nothing to stop you from continuing past that point. Once it's clicked over, you can continue turning against the wrench. So here I have some mounting brackets for a bell crank that are being installed on the main spar. And these are AN3 bolts, which according to the chart in section 5 of the manual, that should be on 5-20 in case you're wondering. They should all be the same as far as the front sections of the manual. Those get torqued 20 to 25 inch-pounds. Now that 20 to 25 inch-pounds is above the amount of torque it requires to rotate this bolt. And that's why I have the beam type. I have the bolt screwed in part of the way. I put the torque wrench on there, I turn it, and it's reading about 10 inch-pounds. Eight inch-pounds to be precise. And each one should be slightly different. This one's reading about 11 inch-pounds. $12 inch-pounds. So once we know that, we go, since it's not a castellated nut, we're going to go for 25 plus 8. So first we'll find our line on here, which is 20. Got it. Then 25, and then plus another 8, which would be 33. And from there, it's a simple task of tightening this down. And usually I click it a couple times just to make sure it's stopped moving. And now we know this is properly torqued. And so we don't forget that we torqued it, we apply our torque stripe. And you want to go from the bolt head across the washer, down the side of the bolt head, across the washer, and to the fixture that it's bolting into, creating a solid stripe. And I made that one a little too fat, but you get the idea. So it's going to bridge the washer, the bolt, and the item it's bolting into. That way, if this spins, it'll create a crack in that torque lacquer or torque stripe. This brand is called Crosscheck, and it's labeled as torque seal. But it's basically a fairly brittle lacquer that adheres quite well to the metal, and then it'll stay there and dry harden, and in any rotational movement of this, it'll crack or break off completely. And you know you need to check this fastener to see why it's loose and if it needs to be retorque it. Also, it's a good indicator of like, hey, did I remember to torque this fastener? And so I don't mistakenly think that I missed it or miss it and build the whole aircraft around it without realizing I missed it. So this one was 12 instead of 8. We need to add another 4 pounds for a total of 37 inch-pounds. And we do the same thing. And usually, I chose the color orange. Usually there's a certain color depending on who's using it. Depending on where the people work, the color coding can be different. I just chose orange because it was a nice visible color. But normally, like if you saw pink, you would know like, hey, I applied those, and somebody else, they might use green to differentiate between the different QAs that are checking torque values. And that stuff is properly torqued. Now these bolts are going into a nut plate, so there's no nut on them. Down here we have 2 bolts with nuts on them. And the process is similar, except for we're going to apply the torque to the nut side and hold the bolt head with a wrench. It has a pretty low rotating force. That one's 6. That one is 4. $20, $28, $34. And on this, over here, I go from the bolt shaft and the threads across the side of the nut down to the washer and on the surface that's being attached to. And then you won't be able to see it, but on the other side where the bolt head is, I'll apply torque seal in the same fashion. So that's the basics of how you torque your nuts and bolts. Since these are just normal nuts and bolts, I go for the max torque on the 20 to 25 range. If it was a castellated nut, I would go to the minimum and then try to get a castellation to line up with the hole that the cotter pin has to go through. And that's just what I was taught while I was an aircraft mechanic. Now, I did mention two other items. You have what I refer to as a crow's foot, and that's what it was taught to me while I was in the military, and then a dog's bone. It's kind of shaped like a dog bone with the two knurls and a skinny middle. And basically these allow, in tight quarters, to get into a nut or a bolt that the wrench might not be able to fit in there and torque it. Imagine there was something like underneath my hand that needed to be torqued, and it's low clearance, so this can fit in there, but a torque wrench can't. And the biggest thing to know about these, when we're using a dog's bone or a crow's foot to torque, we always put the attachment 90 degrees to the torque wrench. This isn't a torque wrench, I'm just using it for illustrative purposes. So you line it up and then you tighten. Supposedly, if you have it at some other angle than 90 degrees, you'll create a longer or shorter moment arm, which will reduce the torque. I could do a whole video on why that's probably not true. I'm just repeating what was taught to aircraft mechanics, at least in the Marine Corps. Crow's foot is used in the same manner. It's just a much shorter offset and open-ended. I don't like using these because they always seem to slip off of whatever you're trying to tighten. My preferred method is the dog bone. And you can also get, like for each size, you probably should get 2 dog bones and then take one of them and shave it down so it's thinner for those really awkward places that you need to get into. There you have it. That should cover everything you need to know about how to torque the nuts and bolts on your aircraft. Good luck with your build. Thanks for watching. Please give this a thumbs up. Feel free to share it with somebody who might have questions about the process, or somebody you're just interested in sharing your hobby with. And if you have any comments, feel free to leave them. I'll try to reply to them. I am really backlogged, and I better get back to finishing this so I make some progress this year. See you later.